The simulation room was silent enough to hear electricity humming through the monitors, but the moment she hesitated, the instructor's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This isn't a game," he snapped, loud enough for the entire class to hear. A few trainees laughed under their breath, nudging each other, smirking at the quiet woman who always stood in the back, always spoke softly, always seemed unsure. She didn't defend herself, didn't look up, didn't even blink. She just kept staring at the shimmering holographic map in front of her, a map that froze her blood the second she recognized it. The corridors, the layout, the breach points, even the code names scribbled along the edges. They weren't random elements of a military training scenario. They were the exact details of a real classified operation she'd lived through, an op so buried under secrecy that even mentioning its name required 2 levels of clearance. The instructor thought she was nervous. He thought she was clueless, timid, inexperienced. But she wasn't frozen because she was scared. She was frozen because she had already survived the very thing they were pretending to simulate. She hadn't come to this course to impress anyone. She hadn't come for rank, praise, or evaluation scores. She came because someone told her this program would help her heal, help her reconnect with the world after being the only survivor of a mission that never officially existed. She came to learn how to breathe again without remembering broken radios, fallen teammates, or the impossible silence of a comes blackout in enemy territory. But standing in that room, watching a holographic reconstruction of the operation she barely escaped, her heartbeat didn't rise the way fear usually demanded. Instead, it dropped, slow, steady, sharp, the same way it had when she'd been inside those walls for real. The trainees saw a woman panicking, but she wasn't. She was calculating. She was counting exits. She was replaying routes. Every second pulled her deeper into memories she'd fought months to suppress, memories of the night her entire team was lost. As the trainees whispered and the instructor prepared to lecture her again, she finally lifted her eyes. One look at the simulation told her everything she needed to know. Someone leaked the mission she survived. And whoever created this scenario had no idea the person standing quietly in their classroom was the reason the operation didn't end in total failure. The room wasn't supposed to feel this familiar. It was just a training floor with polished tiles, neat holographic grids, and instructors who liked to shout more than they listened. But the second the simulation flickered to life, she felt her lungs lock the way they had on the night she lost her entire team. The layout wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same hallway choke points, same double-reinforced blast doors, same rooftop helipad that never received the extraction signal. She scanned the scene quietly, fingers trembling not from fear, but from recognition, so sharp it felt like being stabbed with memory itself. The instructor interpreted her silence as uncertainty and barked, "This isn't a game." Making the other trainees snicker, they had no idea what they were looking at. But she did. She remembered the metallic taste of dust in that place, the smell of burned wiring, the eerie silence when comms went dead. She remembered holding the last encrypted drive her captain handed her before sending her sprinting toward the service tunnel. "Don't stop. Don't look back," he'd whispered. She hadn't known that was the last time she'd ever hear his voice. She escaped alone, barely, and the mission was sealed away under layers of classified fog, and now, here it was again, rebuilt in stunning digital precision, used casually as a training challenge. She stared at the glowing corridor and felt the weight of her breath, steadying. They thought she was overwhelmed. No, she was calibrating. She knew every trap hidden inside that design because she had survived them all. And she knew that whoever created this simulation had unknowingly dragged a ghost back into the light. The instructor approached with a stiff jaw, convinced he was dealing with another timid recruit frozen by pressure. She didn't correct him. What was the point? He had no clearance to know the truth. The trainees smirked, assuming her silence was helplessness, but she wasn't even listening to them. She was listening to the hum of the projectors, the pacing of the animation cycles, and the tiny inconsistencies between the reconstruction and the real facility she had escaped. They changed the angles of the vents. They smoothed the floor seams. They added 2 extra guards in the east wing, but the bones of the place were the same. Her pulse slowed further. Dropping into that controlled state her therapist told her was concerning, but the military once called her greatest asset. High-stress parasympathetic activation, the survivor's calm. She stepped closer, studying the flicker at the far end of the map where the AI placed the breach team. They had positioned them wrong. They'd get slaughtered entering that way. The instructor noticed her expression. "Do you have something to say?" he asked, more annoyed than curious. She finally spoke, a quiet sentence that made 3 trainees frown. "Your entry vector is fatal." They laughed. The instructor raised a brow. "And how would you know that?" She exhaled slowly. "Because that's where my team died." The amusement vanished instantly. The instructor's eyes narrowed. "What operation are you referring to?" She didn't answer, not because she was being dramatic, but because she legally couldn't. That mission lived behind clearance walls he couldn't even dream of accessing. But the map in front of her? It wasn't coincidence. Someone fed real classified schematics into this program. Someone wanted them to rehearse a mission that wasn't supposed to exist. When the simulation began, the trainees charged forward with enthusiasm, rifles raised, boots pounding, voices rising with adrenaline. They followed the instructor's commands, trusting the digital map entirely, but she didn't move. She stood in the back, watching them rush straight into the kill box she had barely escaped years ago. It felt surreal, seeing it all through polished graphics instead of shadow-cloaked concrete walls and blood-slick floors. The eye triggered its ambush sequence, and in seconds half, the team's indicators blinked red, signaling casualties. The instructor cursed under his breath, scribbling frustrated notes. The trainees complained, blaming glitches and unfair difficulty settings. But she knew the problem wasn't the program, it was their approach. She stepped forward, approaching the scene like someone walking through their childhood home after decades away, touching the holographic walls as if they were solid. Her hand hovered over a ventilation shaft. "This vent doesn't lead where you think it does," she murmured. A trainee rolled his eyes. "And how do you know that?" She didn't snap. She didn't posture. She simply said, "Because I crawled through it." Their confusion deepened. She continued tracing invisible paths, the crawl space where she hid for 12 minutes while enemy search teams combed the halls. The maintenance ladder she climbed in the dark with a wounded teammate tied to her back. The generator room she sabotaged using nothing but a broken comms battery. The AI projection didn't show blood, smoke, or desperation, but she saw them anyway. The instructor finally stopped the sim. "You're telling me you've been inside this facility?" Her silence was its own answer. Her eyes, steady, tired, unblinking, held the truth he wasn't cleared to hear. This wasn't a scenario for her. It was a memory. When the instructor begrudgingly restarted the simulation, he surprised everyone by handing her the squad lead controls. "Show us," he said, not mocking this time, but genuinely unsure. The trainees shifted uncomfortably, some annoyed, others curious. She didn't argue. She simply took the controls with the same quiet precision she used the night she was forced to lead alone after her captain fell. Instead of running forward, she guided the digital squad left, toward a janitorial corridor the program labeled as non-operational. A trainee protested. "That route is useless." She didn't reply. She pressed the override, forcing the team into that narrow space, then activated the corridor's maintenance scanner. Cameras lit up, revealing a hidden stairwell leading beneath the main compound, the same route she used to escape. Gasps rippled through the room. "How did you know that was there?" The instructor demanded. She shrugged lightly. "Because it wasn't supposed to exist. It was built off the books. The deeper she guided the simulation, the more the room fell into stunned silence. She bypassed traps before the AI triggered them. She pre-aimed drones at angles no one noticed. She predicted guard rotations with second-by-second accuracy. The trainees stopped whispering entirely. They weren't watching a student anymore. They were watching someone who knew this place intimately, too intimately. At the final checkpoint, she paused, staring at the digital version of the service tunnel where she had made her last stand. She could still feel the weight of her wounded teammate on her back, still hear the alarms. "This is where we lost the last man," she said quietly. No one laughed now. No one mocked her voice. Even the instructor stood rigid, realizing something far larger was happening. And somewhere beyond this training room, someone had turned her trauma into a scenario. After the simulation ended, the room stayed unnervingly silent. The trainees who once smirked at her now watched with wide, uneasy eyes. The instructor approached slowly, no longer towering with authority but standing with cautious respect. "Who uploaded those schematics?" He asked her, but she shook her head. She had no idea. But someone with high-level clearance had taken the classified blueprint of a failed mission, her failed mission, and converted it into training software. She stepped away from the hologram, but her mind wasn't in the room anymore. She was back inside those concrete corridors, dragging herself through the dark while alarms screamed overhead. She remembered the coded message she'd transmitted before escaping. She remembered command telling her no trace of the facility should ever resurface. And yet, here it was, glowing on a screen for ordinary recruits to analyze. The instructor touched her arm gently. "If this mission was real," he said carefully, "you don't have to talk about it, but you can help us adjust the program. You saw things we didn't." She looked around the room, at the trainees who now stood taller, quieter, humbled. At the instructor who finally saw her for what she was, not weak, not timid, but someone carved by a battlefield none of them had clearance to even imagine. So she nodded. "I'll help," she said softly. "But understand something." Everyone turned. "The simulation is a safer version. The real thing was much worse," no one breathed. She walked back toward the console and began rewriting the strategy paths, movements smooth, deliberate, confident. The operation they were trying to simulate was the operation she had already survived. And survival had made her the most dangerous expert they had. The room exhaled as she stepped back from the console, her hands still trembling slightly from the rush of reliving a memory no one else could comprehend. Silence lingered, heavy with awe, as the trainees and instructors processed what they had just witnessed. The soft voice that had once been mocked had spoken louder than anyone imagined, commanding authority not through volume but through knowledge, experience, and survival. The instructor finally broke the quiet, his voice low, almost reverent. I didn't know." "I never imagined." She didn't answer. There was no need. Her presence, steady and composed, had already spoken volumes. Every glance, every cautious step the trainees took toward her reflected newfound respect. They understood now that true mastery isn't learned in lectures or simulations. It is forged in real operations, in moments of life and death, and in the resilience to survive when everything is stacked against you. As the room slowly returned to normal, she gathered her gear, quiet as ever, her eyes carrying the weight of battles fought and lives saved. Outside, the sun dipped low over the base, casting long shadows that mirrored the gravity of her story. Today had been more than a training exercise. It had been a lesson no manual could teach. Survival, courage, and expertise had converged in one unassuming figure, forever changing how everyone in that room would perceive danger, leadership, and strength. And as she walked away, soft footsteps fading into the evening, one truth lingered: the person who seems quiet, the one underestimated, often carries the power to rewrite the rules, and in her case, to survive the impossible. The world would never forget the shadow she had cast, nor the quiet storm she had become.